Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we share the 2020-2021 legislative advocacy priorities of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. My name is Kyle Lively, Superintendent of Somerset Independent Public Schools, and joining me this afternoon are Dr. Anthony Orr of Powell County Public Schools, Mr. Sanford Holbrook of Robertson County Public Schools, Mr. David Gillum of Madison County Public Schools, Miss Amy Baker of Bourbon County Public Schools, Pat Richardson of Pulaski County Public Schools, Mr. Tim Spencer of Menifee County Public Schools, Mr. Scott Hawkins of Woodford County Schools, Dr. Kevin Hubb of Scott County Schools, Dr. Robin Cochran of Washington County Schools, and Mr. Ryan Clark of Bardstown Independent Public Schools. Kentucky Public Schools Superintendents, in partnership with the 8 educational cooperatives, are holding several press conferences in various parts of the state today. We're doing this to highlight our agenda for the 2021 legislative session, as we think it's critical that the news media, and in fact all Kentuckians, know and understand the legislative priorities of the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents and those things that we see as part of the state's education leadership as critical issues that must be addressed. We appreciate the Kentucky Education Development Corporation Executive Director Nancy Hutchinson and the Central Kentucky Education Cooperative Education Director David Young for partnering with us in this event. As leaders of public education in Kentucky, we know our state and communities get the schools they want. These unprecedented times in a global pandemic have amplified the importance of our schools and our communities. First and foremost, for educating our children, while also being an important component of the economy, as schools provide a safe, nurturing environment for children of working families. The pandemic has also highlighted the importance of social and emotional learning for children, which our schools provide through in-class instruction, as well as a variety of extracurricular and co-curricular activities. Our schools have worked tirelessly through the pandemic to educate, feed, and support our students. It has been a challenging task, but in partnership with families and many local, state, and federal agencies, we are finding a way. We advocate for our priorities through the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, which works directly with legislators to share our concerns, needs, priorities, and recommendations. As an organization that represents school district superintendents across Kentucky, KASS believes that advocacy is critical to the success of our schools and is therefore our responsibility as education leaders to do just that. Advocate on behalf of our education system, the students we educate, and the professionals who serve them in our schools and school districts across this great Commonwealth. We will always work with all government officials, regardless of their party affiliation or political perspective, to advocate for these priorities. We do this because we recognize that Kentucky's economic, social, and cultural success depends on our investment in public schools. Simply stated, the quality of our education system is critical to the success of our state and nation. As educators, our role is not only to prepare our future workforce, it's to prepare our future citizens so they can contribute to society in many ways as employees in skilled trades, as professionals in business, industry, and government, as educators, as parents, and ultimately as responsible, productive citizens. So our main goal is student learning achievement and ensuring that Kentucky is in the best position to make that happen. To this end, it's critical to ensure that Kentucky has a well-trained and professional educators, and those educators have the tools, funding, and opportunity to do their job effectively and thoroughly. We recognize this will be an unusual legislative session with the need to pass a one-year budget in a 30-day session. With that being said, we'd like to present our priorities for the 2021 legislative session. At this time, I will present Dr. Anthony Orr, Superintendent of Powell County Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Lively. I'm going to talk just a minute about adequate and equitable funding for education as a top priority. The year 2020 has been an unprecedented one for all of us across the Commonwealth. However, our public school systems and communities are resilient and have been fierce in facing this time. We are grateful for all those involved in the day-to-day challenges and changes that COVID has created. Public school funding from the state must be adequate and equitable if we are to succeed, especially in a time of pandemic. The lack of adequate and equitable funding impacts all students, but especially our most vulnerable and at-risk students. This is most visibly notable in the areas of full-day kindergarten, preschool, and transportation. So we asked the General Assembly to do the following: increase funding allocated through base SEEK to restore equity across communities. Prioritize funding the Learning and Results Services, or LARS programs, that directly serve our students, such as preschool, Family Resource and Youth Service Center, also known as Friskies, instructional resources, state agency, children, gifted and talented, and extended school services, or ESS. Continue the funding already provided to implement the School Safety and Resiliency Act. Ensure professional educators receive high-quality training and development to build their efficacy with students. Continue to equalize local nickel taxes levied by school boards for facility improvements. Increase the SEEK add-on for exceptional children to address the growth in these populations. Support the HANDS program and services for our students in foster care and provided by the Department for Community-Based Services to help us serve special needs among those students. Continue to appropriate the full actuarially determined contributions to the teacher's retirement system and the full amount needed for school employee health insurance. Consider tax reforms to generate the needed revenue to adequately fund public education, including a full review of all tax expenditure exemptions and exonerations. Provide adequate funding to the Kentucky Department of Education to support schools and districts, including modernizing funding for the Kentucky School for the Deaf and Kentucky School for the Blind. Though education is a state responsibility by our Constitution, the burden of education funding has shifted and continues to shift from the state to the local level. We have limited means of raising the much-needed revenue. For more information about that, see the SEEK overview reports from the Council for Better Education. Again, we ask for the General Assembly to provide flexibility for local school boards in their ability to implement or raise taxes to support our students. The bottom line is Kentucky needs to make a stronger investment in its public schools. It's an economic, workforce, and community development investment that will improve the quality of lives for Kentuckians now and in the future. Now my colleague, Mr. Sanford Holbrook from Robertson County Schools will speak.
Thank you. While the budget is our top priority of this short legislative session, several other areas need to be addressed and for which we will be advocating. We will call them the 5 Ps. They include professional educator recruitment, retention, and development. Kentucky's educational policies must ensure that we can attract and retain the best and brightest teachers, administrators, and staff to serve our schools. Research shows that the #1 factor influencing student learning, achievement, and success is professional educator quality. Improving the instructional and leadership capacity of our teachers, principals, superintendents, and other educational professionals is critical, important to our education process. Pension reform. A sound pension system is critical to the goal of attracting and retaining high-quality educators. Privatization. Public education must be fully funded. Privatization efforts divert funds from the public school systems at a time when schools are struggling with underfunding. Privatization proposals tend to shift funding from rural areas to the population centers and too often leave our most disadvantaged students further behind. Principal selection and purview. Superintendents must be given authority to hire principals in consultation with SBDM councils. School boards and superintendents must have a greater voice regarding curriculum and instruction. We advocate for a better balance of authority in these critical areas while maintaining a strong voice for teachers and parents. Protecting our students and schools. Additional and continuing steps must be taken to enhance school safety. including fully funding the School Safety and Resilience Act, SB 1 of 2019. We implored the General Assembly to enhance legal liability protections, provide to local school boards, districts, and employees. Every dollar spent in a courtroom is a dollar not spent educating students in a classroom. Additionally, we must ensure that a child enrolled in homeschool has not received a truancy summons, and adults providing K-12 educational instruction in the homeschool setting meet minimum educational and safety requirements. Finally, we strongly advocate for reforms to protect students and others from any form of bias, including race-based, gender-based, or any form of discrimination. Given current events, it is especially critical we foster a culture of anti-racism and work together to further racial equalities within all facets of society, including our public schools. At this time, I'd like to welcome my friend, Mr. David Gillum, Superintendent of Madison County.
Before we take your questions, I'd like to say a few brief words about next week's election. Educators have always been committed to teaching students about civics and civic engagement. Although we have always done so, we are now required by law to do so. Of course, voting is just one of the many civic activities available to citizens. It allows all of us to share our individual voices as we participate in the democratic process. Because people have a right and responsibility to vote, Kentucky Association of School Superintendents encourages every eligible Kentuckian to do so. In that spirit, KASS is currently running a social media campaign to encourage Kentuckians to vote. We are doing so through a series of social media posts that say just that: go vote. The greater the civic engagement and participation, the stronger we make our communities, the stronger we make our schools and our society across the entire Commonwealth and our great nation.
We'll now take any questions. If there are none, thank you for visiting and tuning in to hear our voice and advocacy for public schools in Kentucky. We appreciate everyone coming and tuning in. Thank you very much.